part of the subtext is that blacks are especially vulnerable to drugs. Lee Brown, African-American former chief of police in a bunch of cities, Atlanta, New York, Houston, was the drug czar under Bill Clinton. And as ideas of drug legalization are expressed, he said drug legalization would be genocide. Now, why would drug legalization kill blacks any more than whites? Except that he has already bought into this idea that there's some special victimhood around blacks. Now, this puts, I think, the finger on the key role that drugs play in maintaining white privilege today. That the data of Human Rights Watch studying American prison population finds nationwide that the rate of black incarceration for drug offenses compared to the rate of white incarceration for drug offenses is 8 times greater. Now, 8 times greater, that's 800%. This is not like a little bit greater. This is an utterly inexplicably greater rate of incarceration. This is the comparison of rates, not absolute numbers. The rate for males, African-American males compared to white males, is 13 times greater. That's 1,300% higher. Now that's one level in terms of the punishment, just what the prison population is. But it works much more powerfully to say that the drug problem is an urban problem, or that the youth at risk of becoming drug users are black youth, that youth at risk and black become synonyms. The role of the politics and the media has been to say the drug problem is a black problem, even though far more whites as a percentage, as rates, use drugs than blacks. Among high school age drug users, cocaine use among whites is 4 times greater than their black peers. Whites smoke cigarettes more, they drink more, they use cocaine more. But when I tell that to a white audience, they can't believe it, because the paradigm, the mental framework, the social foundation is blacks have a drug problem, blacks use drugs, and that serves to maintain white privilege. So I, as a white employer, subconsciously, when a black applicant comes in for the job, I wonder if this young woman's really also a drug user. I wonder if this young man's a drug user. I'll certainly have to check to see what his criminal record is. I mean, I can't hire a black man without doing a criminal background check. I certainly can hire a white person without doing a criminal background check. He's gone to college or whatever. But what happens then is it serves as, because remember, here's the critical timeline. The critical timeline is around 1970. From 1930 to 1970, while segregation remains the law, Plessy versus Ferguson is still the law, the status of being black is to be deviant in a white society. The status of black means you can't sit in this part of the bus, you can't drink from that water fountain, you can't live in this neighborhood, you can't work in these kinds of jobs. In World War II, when millions of American men are serving overseas in the war against fascism, the Philadelphia Transit Company proposed to allow black men to operate the streetcars. And there were 3 days of riots because that had always been a white job. You don't allow black men to have white men's jobs in mid-20th century America. So we have to understand, it's not as though these attitudes were all vaporized and just disappeared when the Civil Rights Revolution was accomplished in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. When the Civil Rights Revolution is accomplished, you have the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, you have the Supreme Court decisions carrying those forward, making Brown versus Board of Education real. At that point, in 1968, Richard Nixon runs for president as a Republican, knowing he has to win the formally Democratic South if he's going to win. And he makes, in the subtext, race is the issue. But he calls it law and order, because we've already established blacks are dangerous in white society. So law and order is his code word for an anti-black political agenda. He creates the Drug Enforcement Administration. He drives the Controlled Substances Act with long sentences through the Congress. He created numerous anti-drug agencies. During this period, when we're fighting the war in Vietnam, black men drafted, serving in Vietnam, coming back, and the investigations come out. You know, there's drug use in the military in Vietnam. Soldiers are coming back addicted. These are men trained in the use of semi-automatic rifles, machine guns. They're going to be committing rape and robbery and mayhem in American cities, and they're black. This is all part of the subtext underneath the creation of the modern war on drugs in the early 1970s. When segregation is outlawed, a facially neutral, racially neutral, new legal doctrine comes in, and arrest rates start to go up. From 1930 to 1970, the rate of incarceration in the United States was level at about 110 per 100,000. One of America's most respected criminologists, Al Blumstein, looks at this data and publishes in 1972 a paper called A Theory of the Stability of Punishment. He argues, look at the data. Society adjusts its offenses to maintain a kind of level kind of rate of incarceration. Look at this 40-year period from 1930 to 1970. Alcohol prohibition, the Great Depression, the war, the post-war boom, the 50s, the turbulent 60s, and the rate of incarceration remains level at about 110 per 100,000. Segregation is outlawed, and the rate of incarceration takes off. It's now over 700 per 100,000, and the black rate of incarceration is, in the thousands per 100,000. And I argue that the role of the war on drugs, is to maintain white privilege. It's not an accident. It's not an unfortunate consequence. It's what it does because it doesn't do anything else. It has not reduced deaths because the death rate from illegal drug use has gone up steadily since 1980, and the rate is now double what it used. The death rate is double what it used to be. It doesn't protect kids from drugs because kids tell us drugs are more available now than they were 25 years ago. We've been asking for 25 years, high school seniors, give us this survey. Tell us how easy it is for you to get heroin, cocaine, marijuana, so on. And these drugs are more available now than they were 20 years ago. Teenage use rates are going up. Since 1992, the number of users has gone from 12 million to almost 20 million. The price of these drugs, supposedly, the whole goal of this effort is drive the price of the drugs down. Excuse me, the goal of the effort is to drive the price of drugs up, to make drugs more expensive. But the price has gone down steadily for heroin and cocaine.
But not for marijuana.
So what? Not for marijuana, but nobody dies from marijuana.
Right, exactly, that's my point.
But the purity, the very first hearing I set up for the House Judiciary Committee in March 1980 was a hearing with Peter Benzinger, the head of DEA, and he tells the chairman of the subcommittee, Congressman Drinan, the gold standard of what we're doing to fight drugs is to reduce the average purity of the drugs in the street. And I'm proud to tell you, Mr. Chairman, that the purity's gone down from 5% to 3%. Today, a couple of years ago, the average purity was over 40% of heroin in the street. The average purity had increased more than tenfold between, the late 1970s and the early 2000. There is no way to measure America's anti-drug problem that doesn't show you a failure to protect the public health and safety.